Hey everyone, welcome to this third episode of CoLab. We are so glad that you are joining us here today. I am the host of CoLab, Justin Spurlock, pastor at Grace, pastor at Covenant, and coaching several new worshiping community leaders and expressions in and around Denver area, the Denver metro. Today, I'm exploring this idea of leadership that listens. So, welcome back. I'm glad that you're joining us. And I want you to think about something that we all at some point have to think about, and that is leadership. The kind of leadership that most of us grew up with is loud, it's busy, it's decisive, and it's often lonely. But in CoLab, leadership looks different. It's shared. It's relational. It listens more than it talks. So today's episode is called Leadership That Listens because we believe the church doesn't need louder leaders. It needs truer ones. I want to explore some cultural myths of leadership. Because let's be honest, leadership in the American church culture often has been shaped more by Silicon Valley or Wall Street than by Jesus. We celebrate the visionary, the sole founder, the CEO, the hero pastor. But here's the problem: heroes, they burn out. CEO pastors, they forget to be shepherds. Lone rangers don't make covenant partners. And often that kind of leadership ends in exhaustion and often, far, far worse, in spiritual harm or even abuse. The gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, offers us a different model. Jesus forms circles, not pyramids. He doesn't delegate power, he simply shares it. And the early church, scattered, scrappy, spirit led, was deeply collaborative. Apostles, deacons, teachers, tent makers, all leading together, all needed in this venture. In CoLab, shared leadership isn't a strategy. It's a spiritual practice. It's the belief that no person and no one church and no one ministry expression carries all the wisdom. It believes that multiple voices reveal more of God's vision. We've created this steering team composed of leaders across different congregations and fresh ministry expressions. It's not always efficient, but it is faithful. Instead of one church setting the pace or one pastor being in charge, instead we discern together. Instead of siloed innovation, we practice communal imagination. And that changes everything. A youth director becomes a regional resourcer. A small church's elder becomes a teacher to many. A pastor learns to ask, "What are you sensing?" instead of, "Hey, let me share with you my plan." This is about flattening. This isn't about flattening leadership. It's about deepening it. One of the most countercultural things a leader can do is listen. Not listen to respond, not listen to fix, but listen to learn. Listen to love. Listen. In CoLab, listening shows up everywhere. We listen to congregational longing. We listen to community losses and needs. We listen across theological difference and spiritual style. And we try to lead not from ego, but from empathy. I'll be honest, there's been moments I've had to bite my tongue. Moments I realize when I've realized I'm more committed to being right than being connected. But every time I choose to step back and listen instead of taking control, I've seen God open something new. Listening doesn't mean passivity, it means humility. And from that humility, real authority emerges because it's rooted in grace. So, what if we stopped asking who's in charge and started asking who needs to be heard? What if leadership meant creating space rather than filling it? In CoLab, we're experimenting with new rhythms. What does it mean to have a rotating preaching team instead of trying to justify our preacher and pastoral jobs? What if it's shared decision making instead of authoritarian? What if it's a collective spiritual practice for leaders? And guess what? That's slow. That's messy, but that's alive. Every life is slow and messy. Everything that is going to have any staying power is slow and often messy. I'm learning that leadership doesn't have to look like power. Instead, it can look like partnership. And that's not weakness. Instead, that's the body of Christ. So, I want you to stop and ask yourself some questions. When in your life are you being called to lead with ears instead of a megaphone? Where could you invite someone else to the table? Not for agreement, but simply for sharing and contribution. If you're in church leadership, what could it look like to lead from collaboration rather than competition or control? And if you're not in leadership, what does your voice carry that your community needs to hear? The church we long for doesn't need more bosses. Instead, it needs more bridge builders, more, as the Hebrew scriptures say, more midwives, more friends. And what if you and I could be one of those? Friends, thanks for joining me today and listening to CoLab Church Reimagine. If this episode gave you something to ponder, something to challenge or something to hope for, share it. Next week, we'll talk about what happens when staffing gets shared. Episode 4 is called A New Way to Staff the Church, and it might just blow up everything you've thought about roles, titles, and ministry resources. Until then, lead with listening. Grace and courage to you. Thanks, everyone.